things, because this is what pretty much gives us our right to cop watch in the USA. So it comes from the First Amendment, and that is the the freedom of the press, redress of agreements, the right to assemble like we're doing today. And so that freedom of the press pretty much is what gives us the right to cop watch. So then the Fourth Amendment is something else that we're going to talk about. Oh yeah, also before I move on, there's something called the Glick case that maybe you should check out. And that was an instance back in early 2000, I think, where a lawyer cop watched and an officer tried to tell him he couldn't be cop watching and taking his camera and took his footage, but then he put out saying, does anybody else have footage of this? And someone did. They brought it to court, and the judge, basically said they took it up to the Superior Court because it was a lawyer and he had the resources to do this. But they said, no, you can actually do this cop watching, because it's the First Amendment, and the police or anybody really doesn't have the expectancy to privacy in a public place. So you can videotape anybody, like you're all videotaping me right now, and what's going on here. You can videotape anything in a public place. So then we're going to move on now to the Fourth Amendment, which is no reasonable search and seizure. So that is what makes them not be able to take your cell phone camera or your camera that you're using, because you just got it out there right out in the open. It's not like you're trying to hide a camera, and or even if that, there's no reasonable search or seizure. So what also I want to talk about this is, you want to practice not consenting to a search. The police are gonna want to search you down and stuff, but it's good to practice saying like, I don't consent to a search, and what that does is just like assert your rights to the police, not consenting to a search, because you have the right to do that, and unless they like arrest you, that's when the only time when they're allowed to search you. So there's something called like due process, which is the Sixth and Eighth Amendment, and if they search you any time before they actually arrest you or detain you or whatever, you can get that evidence thrown out in court if you have like a lawyer, like the National Lawyers Guild or something. They will say, I motion to throw this evidence out because there's a violation of due process. So if they do an unreasonable search, that evidence shouldn't count. And then now we're going to talk about the Fifth Amendment, no self-incrimination. So the Fifth Amendment is your right to stay silent, and you should probably avoid it. I mean, not avoid it. I mean, you should probably use it and take advantage of that, because you might incriminate yourself saying some things like with some police officers, like, where'd you come from, where'd you go, who do you know, this and that. It's better to stay silent until you talk to a lawyer if you're getting arrested. And some people think that they have to read you your rights when they arrest you. They actually don't have to read you your rights when they arrest you. The only time that they have to read you your rights is if they're going to question you or do any interrogation. Then they have to say you have the right to remain silent because they're about to interrogate you. And then you can say, no, I don't want to talk until I talk to a lawyer. So it's good to just practice these things, and it might be hard and stuff, and it might be scary sometimes if you're down there at the station, but try to practice it. And the Sixth and Eighth Amendment, is the due process. You have the right to know your nature of arrest, and also that falls under no unusual and cruel punishment. So they're not allowed to like beat you and stuff like that if they are questioning you and things like that. And so these are those amendments that say that. Now we're going to move on to the next one.
Okay, so there's also 3 types of stops, and one of them...
State laws and city laws. Okay, sorry. All right, actually we're going to finish up with these 3 types of laws. So then there's state laws, and then there's city laws. So the state laws are the penal codes, and what those are, the penal codes are like what you hear when they say, oh, there's been a 187, there's been a 211. Those are the penal codes. And the state laws are what the police are going to put you in jail for and stuff like that. Those are like felonies and things like that. And then there's city laws, and these are municipal codes. This is quality of life laws are usually what these are based on. So for an example, there's a law in Berkeley called the 3-dog law, and that is that you're not allowed to walk more than 3 dogs at a time down the street. Now some people think that's for like dog walkers or something, but that's actually for the like crust punks that have dogs and stuff. So that's what that law was made for. So most of these municipal laws are actually what they call quality of life laws, like no sleeping in a public place or lodging and stuff like that. Okay, now let's move on to the 3 types of stops.
Okay, so there's 3 types of stops when you're dealing with the police. The first one that we're going to talk about is consensual stop. And this is when a cop, let's say you're just like hanging out somewhere and a cop comes up to you and says, hey, how's it going? Like, what's your name? What are you doing here? Who do you know? And those are consensual. And you have to keep in mind, if you're not doing anything illegal, the cop they can go up to you and start asking you these questions. Now that's when you have the right to be silent and you have the right not to talk to the police at that point, because you're not doing anything, you're not being detained, you're not being arrested. So these are voluntary encounters. So what you do at that point, if you find yourself in that situation, is to say, you know, I don't need to talk to you at this point. Am I free to go? And if you're not being detained, then the police officer has to say yes. So it's really important to really not talk to the police and really make that a habit, because what may happen sometimes, like if I were asking Eddie, like, oh, you know, what time did you get out of work? And Eddie says, well, I got out at 8 o'clock. And I'm like, okay, well, where do you work? And he says that he works on this corner and that corner. Then the cops, sometimes what they do is say, oh, really? Because there was a robbery at 8:15 at this corner, and you fit the description, so now you're being detained, and now you may be arrested. So it's really, really important that if it's a consensual encounter, that you not say anything. And the key phrase is to always ask, am I free to go? And then after that, you can go on your business. The second one is a detention, and this is if they have reasonable suspicion. So this, and you can be detained if you look like someone that they're looking for, things like that, which happens a lot. But this is like a limited investigation because you're not really being arrested. You're not being arrested yet, but they're just questioning you. And again, you do have the right to remain silent. You don't need to talk to the police. Okay, and then something important for the detention is that you do have to show your ID, but you don't have to talk to the police. So what could end up happening if you refuse to show your ID is that they can say, oh, really? Well, you're not cooperating with us. Let me take you down to the station so we can fingerprint you. And that might make matters even worse. So if you have it on you, show your ID, but again, don't say anything at all. And this is, if you're being detained, they do have the right to pat search you, but they don't have the right to like put their hands in their pockets or kind of like, well, let me see what you have in there. And they don't, so they can pat search you, but they can't reach into your pockets or get your backpack or start looking through your things. And again, don't consent to a back search. So oftentimes what the police do is they don't even ask you. They see your backpack and they're like, all right, well, let me see this. Let me see what you got in here. So it's really important that if you find yourself in that situation, again, the key phrase is say, I do not consent to this. Because like Eddie was saying, if you say that you don't consent to it and it's an illegal search, if they do end up finding something in your backpack, then that can be thrown out as evidence because it was illegal in the first place. But again, if you're being detained, they can pat search you. Show your ID just to make things a little easier for you. But again, don't talk, don't say anything at all. But also keep in mind, if you don't have your ID, it's not a crime.
Hey that's kind of loud. Hey everybody, my backpack was over there when I was playing basketball. It's like a black JanSport